esteemed panel. Ed Donnellan is president and founder of Telecom Infrastructure Corporation. Ed has been involved in the electrical, communications, and data processing industry for over 40 years. As CEO of Telecom Infrastructure Corp., the company he founded in '86, he serves Fortune 1000 companies as a specialist in designing and implementing information and communications technology systems. Prior to establishing Telecom, Ed was a communications consultant to many Wall Street firms, as well as a senior communications analyst with the Reader's Digest Association and American Can Company. Ed is a lifetime advocate of the importance of quality education. He is a past president of Bixby, holds an electrical license, and has served the Bixby board for 10 years. Ed is active in Bixby Cares, City Harvest, and St. Mary's Food Pantry of Mohegan. Doug Fishman. Doug is joining us from beautiful South Carolina. Hey, Doug. Doug is Squan's Director of DAS Design and Implementation, where he's responsible for DAS testing, implementation, and commissioning. Prior to Squan, Doug held positions as a consultant with RCC, RF manager with AT&T, an applications engineer with ADC, and several other positions in the wireless industry. Mr. Fishman has worked both for and with wireless carriers for the past 20-plus years. He has more than 20 years of industry experience with DAS from assistant integrator, consultant, vendor, and carrier standpoints. Doug is also a fellow NEDAS Advisory Council member. So Doug, we'll do our gang signs a little bit later sometime. Tom Chamberlain, Area Vice President of Sales at Westel. Tom has 20 years of experience in the telecommunications industry, serving 13 years selling DAS solutions to carriers, integrators, neutral host providers, REITs, and enterprise customers across all vertical markets. Tom began his career selling OSP, fiber optic, network construction services to carriers and power utility companies. After working closely in a partnership with MyCom and a high-profile DAS tunnel project, he joined MyCom selling high-power ODOS products. Andrew Corporation acquired MyCom, and Tom continued selling ODOS and in-building DAS products for Andrew. He later held positions selling in-building DAS products and solutions with mobile access, ADRF, and integrators. Raymond Dutremblay is Vice President of Building Technology Systems at WSP Parsons Brinkerhoff. A longtime vet of the RF industry, Ray has managed highly successful projects of many sizes in voice, data, medical systems, NOC, and software evaluations in the US and abroad. Mr. Dutremblay has a broad range of knowledge in technology, project management, and construction. Welcome, Ray.
Thank you.
So the purpose of today's panel is really to discuss the role of the system integrator in the world of DAS and small cell. We really want to focus specifically on the end user's behalf, whether the end user is the venue owner, the wireless carrier, or the venue occupant. We're going to leave time at the end of the panel for questions, but we're going to dive right in. So to start off, Ed, what would you define as a system integrator today?
Well, I can speak from our experience here in Manhattan. We've evolved a bit as a contractor. We're kind of a hybrid, so we got involved many years ago in implementing systems and buildings. And the integrator role that we're involved with now really is a combination of all the ecosphere of what's happening within the building envelope to get the project done in a timely fashion. And, you know, we have an old saying here in New York City, take your time, hurry up. So when it comes to market between the financial and legal obligations and the deal gets done, typically the carrier wants the system put in very, very fast. And that's what we specialize in. So what we're doing is we're orchestrating all the players, the contractor, the carrier, the consultant. We're orchestrating very often the mechanical, electrical, HVAC. We're explaining the pathways and spaces. we're attending the bid walkthrough, we're doing design, attending the bid walkthrough. There's actually 24 steps that we're involved with as an integrator that I documented at a previous, yesterday's presentation, that we're involved with. So it's really from concept to completion, and very often our role here in the city is to expedite that turnover, to get that network up on the macro as soon as possible. So we're really interfacing in a variety of different roles as well with distribution, manufacturing, helping to receive and expedite material. So it's really, we plug into a lot of different unique areas. We're kind of the glue that makes it happen.
Excellent, excellent. Doug, can you hear me?
Yeah, let me jump on there on
Great.
what I just said. I think the important role of the system integrator is to be a single point of contact for either the venue owner or the carrier or whoever the customer might be. You know, that one company that can do it all, so to speak, and really needs to do it all seamlessly to whoever the client is. And that's really the value of the integrator.
Great. Right.
And I'd like to add that the difference between, and I represent the engineering side of things, WSP Parsons. So we produce drawings and specifications. We do not install, which an integrator installs. Now, are there any architects in the audience? No? Well, one of the most important things is that the engineer, and technology is new to the engineering world. You know, it's mechanical, electrical, plumbing. Now every building has to have technology. We have to make sure that early in the process, in the design, that the spaces are available for the DAS equipment, that the power and the cooling is available. So that's the difference, and that's the very important job of the engineer.
I want to add to that as well. We'll do the IB Wave design as an integrator. We'll check, very often we'll get out to the building and we'll check pathways and spaces to make sure that the cable can be put in. And we'll also, this is very important, we'll also, and this is in the expediting mode, we'll also check with the chief building engineer, the facilities folks, but most importantly, very closely coordinate the tenant requirements, because we have to gain tenant access, and very often that requires some pre-planning, pre-notification, and all this is done off hours.
So you bring up an interesting point, and that goes to the various roles of the system integrator. How does that look like today for the DAS and small cell process? Doug, do you want to chime in on that?
Ed covered some of it. You know, we have to wear a lot of different hats as a system integrator. So we need to be a designer, you know, be able to do the IB Wave design. We need to be a tester, be able to validate the design, be able to test it after it's built. We need to be able to build it. We need to be a negotiator, you know, be able to act as a middleman between the carriers and the venue owners for those neutral host installations. So there's really a lot of roles, and in some cases, not every company does all those roles, which is fine because they can subcontract out what expertise you don't have. Again, as long as this is really transparent for your client and end user.
Great, excellent. In what ways does the system integrator work on the end user's behalf, Tom?
I think in many ways, the system integrator is really the interface between the end user, and I guess before you talk about that, you really need to understand what's your definition of the end user. The end user, in some senses, could be the carrier, it could be the tenant, it could be the building owner, or it could be the individual person that's in that space. So I think the integrator has to have a complete, comprehensive understanding of all of that to really come with a good solution. And I think with the integrators, it's important to have a good understanding of, enough understanding of RF to do a good job, but also to have a good fundamental understanding of the construction and installation to make things work. If you take it from the standpoint of RF design from just pure RF, you're not going to have a good solution. You're going to end up putting antennas in places that aren't going to work. You're not going to, you're going to have to end up redesigning and moving things because that's just not the real world. If you take a look from the standpoint of construction only and don't consider RF, you're going to have the opposite problem where it's just not going to work. The propagation is not going to meet the standards that you're trying to achieve. So I think one of the challenges from the OEM standpoint, when OEMs, there are cases where OEMs try to take that role on and they'll subcontract to somebody to do installation, but they're taking on a role of an integrator a little bit too much. I think it's, in some cases, it doesn't produce the best result. I think, let integrators be integrators and, everybody works together and I think you get the best ultimate result.
Ed, how are those dynamics for you?
Well, we're acting on the end users. The end user's behalf to us is really the people that are going to use the phones. Our customer very often is the 3POs or the carriers, but the end user is somebody who we want to enable. The research shows that if you look from a historical perspective, you're all carrying about $900,000 worth of software in your pocket. And if your DAS doesn't work, you're greatly limited in your productivity compared to 30 years ago. This software that's enabling, the connectivity is very, very paramount to productivity. So we're enabling that. So the bottom line is they want to know how fast we can get the system up and running. Mm-hmm. They waited long enough. We're going to expedite it. We're going to get it done for them. And then ultimately, they want to have strong signal everywhere. That's ubiquitous coverage throughout the entire envelope of the building. So we're advocating for that. We're also advocating for technology change. So we're there for the end user, quite frankly, to go from 2G to 3G to 4G, AWS, LTE, and to 5G. And those are different layers that we're putting in to keep current with the trends of technology.
Excellent. Doug?
There's always a balance between the design and the actual implementability of the design. Where, certainly on IBWay, the design is great, but if you go in the field and start building, especially with construction, where you can't necessarily know everything ahead of time, you may have conditions where you have to modify the design, you need to change something in the field, and you've always got to keep in mind the cost. And that's really how you keep in mind the user, the cost versus a good integrator will work ultimately with the end user to come up with the best decision in terms of balance of cost.
Ray, question for you. Can a system integrator replace the need for a consultant for the venue owner?
Well, I would say no. Again, it's important that the A&E team, the architectural and engineering team that's involved early in the design process or the renovation of a building, make sure that we provide the infrastructure, the pathways, the spaces, and work as a team with the integrator so that when the integrator installs the DAS system, an example is placement of antennas. A lot of times the ceiling of a building, especially in New York, is packed with ductwork, with sprinkler pipes. Mm-hmm. And then we also have sometimes limited shafts that go from the point of entry up to the telecom closets. It's our job as an A&E engineer to make sure that they are adequate and work as a team with the integrator to make that happen. Now, during the installation, that's where we cannot replace the integrator as an engineer, because we only produce drawings and specifications, and we do some on-site construction administration. So my advice would be when you're choosing an integrator or an engineer for that matter, to ask some questions. Have you worked with this firm before? What is your experience, so on and so forth, to make sure that the engineer really has good relationships, with the integrator, because we're all working for the same goal, which is to get a good system that works in front of the client.
Yeah, to echo what you're saying, Ray, it's a very close working relationship with the entire team. So it's very, very important that there be harmony as well between all the participants. So we do want to check our systems occasionally with the consultant to make sure we're on board. Antenna placement is key. A lot of times the antenna placement, the material that you're going to mount the antenna in, or the lack of material, will dictate the method of cable distribution, as well as, and very, very often, there's special techniques to mount antennas in metal ceilings, above ceilings, on rod that is exposed, and that's where the architect comes in, as well as the consultant. Is they prefer not to see it, of course. Sure. But the reality is that we have to kind of closely coordinate all of those aspects with the consulting team and the architectural team.
Okay. Doug?
The important thing to me, in addition to the communication between the consultant and the integrator, is that they can both be understanding of the other's challenges. Because what I find sometimes, sometimes the consultant and integrator are butt heads, because the integrator might be coming more from a construction standpoint and consultant more from an engineering standpoint. But in the end, they both have the same client, they both are on the same team, and they need to come to an agreement that's going to be best for the mutual client.
Excellent, excellent. Tom, can a venue owner go to just one of the DAS vendors for their DAS needs instead of just reaching out to a VAR system integrator?
Different OEMs have different practices and philosophies on the way they address that. I've never been a big proponent of OEMs getting involved and going direct to a customer. I've done it. There's some cases where you have to do it. If there's an RFP and it's going out to all OEMs and you're sitting there, the business is either going to go to one of your competitors or it's going to go to you. Many cases I've tried to bring it to a VAR and you can't always do it, so you have to bid it. And in those cases, you've got to select the right partner to do the job, and that gets political. You select one over another, and somebody's offended because you're doing that. But that's, you work through that. In the end, the optimal situation is go to the integrator. OEMs are in the they're in the R&D, RF design business, and the manufacturing business. They're not good at integration. They don't really generally have the project management skill set. They quite often don't have any local talent that needs to be there. So much of this, it's not just what you know, it's who you know and what the little idiosyncrasies of a region or a market are. There's no better example of that than New York. I mean, New York, you have to know the way things work in New York for things to go smoothly, efficiently, at the lowest possible cost. It's going to be a fairly expensive venture no matter what. It's how do you do it as low cost as possible. I don't think OEMs are good at that. Others have different opinions. And in the end, people sometimes forget, in the end, the system gets turned up and then, we all go on our merry way. Well, there's always an upgrade. There's always an expansion, new frequencies, new technologies. There's constant change in these systems. And an OEM's really not well equipped to address that. And there's also troubleshooting and support. The integrators are the most capable and qualified people to support that. So my recommendation is work with OEMs that, really have a good VAR, either a formal VAR program or a informal VAR program where there's a lot of trust and respect and cooperation.
Would you say that's more of a channel constraint or an education for that partner?
I don't think it's either or. I think it's both, really. It's channel management. I think it's more channel management, really. It's the way that just your best approach to capture that business. I mean, as OEMs, we're all under pressure. Some of the OEMs are privately held, some are publicly traded. We're a publicly traded company, so there's tremendous pressure to hit your numbers each month in each quarter. We just finished up our fourth quarter, and the pressure is unbelievable. And you've got to answer to investors, and there's always that temptation to, we'll make this one exception, we'll sell this one direct. And I've always been a fan of, I'll lose the business today and have the relationship tomorrow. I've seen what happens when you don't do that, but that's, you have to stick with your principles and stay with that and be consistent with that. If you, because in the end, it's a relationship that's going to go on. And the guy who you've treated well, with respect, he's going to be the guy, he's going to select your equipment on the next project. Or maybe not select it, but it's going to be a serious consideration.
Yeah, I think, to echo what Tom's saying, it's really to respect the food chain. It's very important that we maintain that relationship. I think that's very vital.
As we all know, it's a small market.
It is very small.
So how can the DAS vendor work with a system integrator to ensure that they're having the best experience for the end user? Tom.
I think the key is to, sort of respect each other, work together, and stay in your lane. Don't overstep the bounds. Don't ever throw the integrator under the bus. I've seen that many times. Quite often an integrator will say, "Oh, the problem was the equipment," and the OEM will say, "Oh, the guy didn't install it right." That's, in the end, that's not going to solve anything. It's just going to cause friction. The real approach is to, whatever the issue is, whatever the challenge is, you work it out together, and because in the end, everybody wants the same thing. They want the system to work. They don't want problems. They want it to be smooth, as future-proof as possible, and everybody be happy. So, I think it's just work together.
Doug, what's your practice for your team at Squan?
Well, I think first of all, the vendor is a very important partner of the integrator. And also, in terms of any finger pointing that might happen, that should all happen behind the scenes then, because the integrator is not the vendor. So vendors that you like working with are easy to get in touch with, are supportive or reactive to our needs, and that's why we like working with them. So as long as they can be supportive, reachable, reactive, and obviously the equipment works well and reliable, that's an important thing.
I'd like to add one thing, if you don't mind. One thing that OEMs, I think when you're looking for an OEM, it's not just the equipment itself, it's the support, sort of what Doug was referencing. And that support starts really before the project. It starts with the OEM going out, investing the time to train the people at that integrator so they fully understand the equipment, how it works, all the components of it, because in the end, the integrator's out there selling that, or they're selling a solution or presenting a solution, putting it in a proposal, and they have to be knowledgeable, professional, to instill confidence. And that's the OEM's responsibility to prepare the integrator to do that. That's our job. That's before a project exists. And my attitude is we don't win projects, well, the integrator won't win a project with our equipment unless we do that on the front end, which is a lot of time and energy, but that's what we do.
And I'd just like to echo those sentiments. After the integrator has been hired, it's very important that they meet with the engineering and architectural team to go over what changes may have to be made in the infrastructure, the electrical infrastructure, and the mechanical or cooling infrastructure, to make sure that these are worked out behind the scenes and not in front of the client. That's very important.
Yeah, for me, it boils down to three components: education, training, and support. And as far as I know, there's no one common body that provides education like Bixby provides it for structured cabling in the DAS arena. So we go to our OEMs, we go to our partners, we go to our testing manufacturing companies, and the manufacturer's rep for education and training. So we can stay current on the latest techniques as it rolls out, like for instance PM or different types of connectors that have been advocated to minimize interference. So we want to reach out to that community. So we'll host training, and I think that's absolutely paramount as we go forward, that we have support, education, and training.
Great, great. As a best practice, should system integrators align themselves with a specific DAS vendor? And what are the advantages and disadvantages of both? Let's start that off with Ed.
Okay.
Go ahead.
Yeah, thanks for that question. We advocate for kind of a open look at things. So we don't align ourselves with a particular vendor. We really never have. We want to become aware of all the manufacturer's solutions. As a matter of fact, as part of the process of becoming an integrator, you'll experience something that goes along the lines of becoming an IBWay, certified design shop. Then you'll actually send out your RF engineers or whoever you have that's getting certified on that. You'll send them out to different manufacturers training. And so in the case of, just a year ago, you'd probably send them out to 6 different manufacturers. That's changed a bit now. There's not so many, but they're kind of merged. But you'll send them out to get trained on that. So there's a bit of investment that goes on there to get the system up and running, so to speak. So you'll be knowledgeable about all the major manufacturers' equipment. From a technical perspective, you'll be able to design it and specify it so that it's guaranteed to work.
Doug, what's your take on the allegiance? Is there a play there for more leads? What's your take?
Kind of a similar view that Ed does in terms of vendor neutrality. We're not married to any specific vendor at Swan, and it's important to be able to have flexibility to select the best solution for a specific application. And you lose some of that when you rely yourself closely to a single vendor. In reality, you can't be an expert on all vendor equipment, so, everyone has their 2 or 3 favorites, let's say. But overall, I think, it's in the best interest of the end user for the integrator to have experience with different vendors so they can select the right application.
Right.
Very quickly, from an engineering standpoint, I absolutely agree. To coin a term from the technology world, which is a little old now, but the best of breed is what we're looking for. What is the best solution for the individual building, for the type of construction that will give the best coverage for cellular and Wi-Fi?
Tom, from an OEM standpoint, what's your stance?
Well, both Squan, Doug Fishman, and Ed from Telecom Infrastructures, they both are of a similar camp where they have that very broad agnostic approach where they really do look at each venue independently, which I agree. I think that's the right way to do it. I've seen a lot of other integrators fall into a trap that is really a OEM marketing plan where, and I mentioned earlier that, some OEMs have a formal VAR program and other ones have a more informal VAR program. The formal VAR programs, quite often you'll have your platinum level, gold, silver, bronze, tin, whatever it is. It's really just marketing, in my opinion. And what happens is an OEM will offer a higher level of discount on the products if the integrator is purchasing a certain volume, and they either want to maintain that threshold or increase their purchasing to the point where they get to the next threshold to get the discount. And I understand that. That's completely logical to maximize the profit on the project. But what happens is you lose sight of matching up the proper OEM DAS solution to the venue. And I have seen some integrators fall into this marketing program that is really in the best interest of the OEM. It's not really in the best interest of the integrator. And I think Ed and Doug I don't think they're unique in this, but they have a common belief that that is not the way they do it. They really do look at it as the venue independently. And each building is so unique and different that I don't know how you can really do it any other way.
Well, I just want to perform the litmus test on that. Having said that, that's our philosophy. However, we do an awful lot of work for the carriers, and let's acknowledge the carriers have a preferred solution. So by that very nature, we do have more experience with their preferred solution than what we can offer.
That's a very valid point. And that varies from region to region. You'll have one particular carrier will love one OEM and not so much like another one. And because many integrators are doing work for both carriers and enterprise projects, I completely understand that they have to work with that. And because in the end, there's some carrier coordination that has to happen, and we have to make the carriers happy as well, or else nobody's on the system. We have to take that into account.
And this is very important when it's a neutral host system, when there are multiple carriers on the system. If it's a Verizon only, they may dictate what OEM is being used. I just want to add that outside of the United States, in Canada and in China, I believe that's not the case. A lot of times the carriers will put in a neutral host DAS, and they have inter-carrier agreements, formal agreements that they have to work with each other.
Before we go any further, the OEMs have to deal with the carrier influence as well. When we talk to AT&T, we talk to Verizon, T-Mobile, everybody has a different opinion on the type of connectors they want in an equipment. Well, we can't have the luxury of manufacturing equipment specific for each carrier. So whether they want SMA or QMA or 4.3-10 or mini-DIN or, and we try to gather as much information as possible, so we have to manage that as well. We have to, it's not, we're not equipment agnostic, but we have to, it goes down to the component level when it comes to manufacturing, and it gets a little more complex.
How does the DAS integrator facilitate and work with the contractor, the 3POs, and the carriers? Ed?
Well, I think, I kind of covered that before. I mean, we're kind of the glue to make it all work very quickly, and, coordinating and kind of what Doug was talking about, kind of, doing the juggling act of making sure that everything's happening in concert with the build out. So you're really a master coordinator. You're using, project management techniques, Gantt charts, PERT charts, to make sure that things that were planned happen, and then if they don't, of course, they're probably not going to happen exactly as planned. You have an alternate path or an alternate recourse. A lot of times we're coordinating and expediting labor requirements. I mentioned that a lot of the buildings that we're doing here in the city, they're all done at night. Very often we're doing them in record time. So a building that typically would take, if you take 1 million square foot, it might take 6 months. You might get to a point where the 3PO or the carrier wants it done in 6 weeks. So you have to really think about how you're going to go to market with that, and come up with some pretty creative techniques of expediting and working with the contractor for multiple crews in multiple areas. So the vertical is being expedited with the fiber backbone, the horizontal is being expedited with the copper and antenna placement, and then you're following right up with PIM and sweep testing so that you can green light the system and bring it up expeditiously.
Excellent.
Again, one comment that's very practical from experience. The integrator should make sure that they have someone regularly attend the construction meetings. Right. That's very important. I don't know, are there any construction managers in the audience? Yeah, right. So it's very important that as part of the construction team, that there be regular feedback between, because they're contractors just as the drywall or electrician or anyone else, and that's very, very important.
What role does the DAS integrator play post-DAS acceptance of the macro for the end user? Doug, why don't you start off?
Generally, the integrator would like to continue to be involved in a maintenance standpoint. Typically, for the first year, at least, the system's covered under some sort of warranty. But beyond that, the venue owner, the end user, will need someone to watch over the system, to monitor it, and to address any failures that might happen, to do things like preventative maintenance to keep the system running properly. So that's certainly a role that the integrators are getting more involved with as more and more tasks are being built.
Yeah, we get involved with a lot of retrofits, restacks, technology upgrades as it relates to the building envelope and the tenant space, lease expiring, coming in, doing demo. There'll be some either pre-planning or post-planning. The pre-planning calls for the antennas to be pulled up in the ceiling. The post-planning calls for the entire floor to be recabled because they demo it out. There's also trouble restoration. When you have alarms, we'll dispatch and we'll figure out what sector is bad or what particular antenna is bad. So the trouble restoration, and then there's maintenance and upgrades. So you'll have power supplies going, you'll have upgrades to different layers like AWS layer or the LTE implementation, and you'll actually have other carriers come on after the initial carrier. So it might be a neutral host, but the carriers don't all come on at the same time. So you'll be there to kind of shepherd the commissioning of that and making sure that everything goes smooth.
Yeah, I'd like to add that monitoring is becoming a very important subject with the end users now. They want, and this is a good revenue source also for the integrators, that they want constant monitoring to detect problems before they occur and try, well, not before they occur, but as they occur, and to try to get some resolution. An example would be if the source signal drops out. So that usually involves the carriers, but it could be some other things too. But with monitoring, which can be, again, a good recurring revenue, that can be found out, identified, and then corrected, sometimes even before the user knows that something's wrong.
Yeah, Tom was talking about this yesterday, near-far, interference. And one of the things that we're looking at from an integration perspective is, even though we do the CW testing apples pre and post, and everything looks good, the macro changes, and 80% of the buildings built here in New York City were built prior to 1960, which means that they don't have e-glass, so they're being affected by the macro as well as the other phones. So we're looking at putting film on windows, quite frankly, to keep the bad stuff out and the good stuff in. So that's a way to enhance the building envelope, but also get, quite frankly, rebates from an energy conservation perspective. So we're looking at that marketplace and seeing how we can help the end user have better signal in their building and better security, quite frankly, with Wi-Fi and cell phone.
Sure, and there's some new technologies that are being developed to date with that as well. So.
Yep.
Tom? Good. In consideration of the entire DAS ecosystem, what are some areas of improvement for ensuring a successful DAS integration process? Doug? Yes.
So, where things can improve, one area that I was thinking about was on the front end, where, especially where you're dealing with construction, is getting an integrator involved early in the process. Working with the consultant, with the engineer, get the integrator who has the experience of building these systems involved, so they're key, as opposed to often we're brought in, we're building, and it's, you know, halfway built already, and it's like, okay, run, get it done, and by that point, a lot of times it's too late to fix what issues there are.
Boy, I couldn't agree more. I think we've all in New York been in the place where, like, hurry up and get it done, as Ed, you said. But it's sometimes, and I will say usually, technology is an afterthought to the architects. No architects in the room, that this has to be considered early. Again, technology is a requirement, right along with mechanical, electrical, and plumbing. So the earlier the integrator gets involved, the less it's going to cost in change orders to make sure that system works. And again, that's the name of the game in construction, is to reduce change orders.
To increase change orders.
Oh, that's the contractor. I'm sorry. I once rode on a boat called change order. So.
I'd like to address that also. Ray's right. I mean, I've had early meetings with A&E firms to educate them about the technology and what needs to happen. And, you know, you almost feel like you're going into battle with architects because they're all about how it's going to look versus how it's going to function. That's the constant ongoing battle. But one thing that you mentioned, get involved early, I completely agree with that. But when these projects, for new construction, it's, you know, 1, 2, 3 year projects. And by that time that third year comes around, if you haven't been involved all along with updates, the carriers are rolling out new technology constantly. It has to be updated multiple times, and it's not just getting in early. I completely agree with that, but it is really getting them completely educated and ongoing education. That's what's missing in this industry
Sure.
more than anything. And
Right.
I was disappointed when Ray said, how many architects in the room? We need more architects in the room. We need more
Right.
A&E firms in the room. That's who needs to be here. So we don't, because we're all trying to fix the problem on the back end. We need to fix it on the front end.
We'll get those invites out. All right, we're going to open this up for a couple real quick questions. If anybody in the audience has a question that they'd like to ask the panelists.
Just on. All right. So as integrators, at what phase, when you're designing and building these networks, are you looking at the backhaul requirements, and how are those requirements defined? Is that being driven by the end user, by the customer, by the needs of the network as you're developing it?
The backhaul requirements are essential to make sure that the circuit is ordered with plenty of time to get it burned in and ready to go. Several jobs we've been on, we've turned up the entire infrastructure with no circuit. So, you know, one of the things, and there's some tricky parts to it. I think some of the folks that were speaking today were talking about the importance of getting the infrastructure to the building. So you want to make sure that you have your circuits ordered and that they're green lighted as well, so that macro commissioning can take place. So that should happen right away. Actually, before the construction starts. Again, we're talking about 1 million square feet, typically about 6 to 8 months, 2 million, perhaps 8 to 10. But sometimes it'll take 3 to 4 months to get the circuit there.
Right, but are those requirements then, or is that being driven by your overall network design, or are you just selecting that in advance and working from that?
Actually, the carriers are, in many cases, the carriers are responsible for delivering that circuit. So we'll coordinate with them to expedite it, because they'll drop it at the MPO, or the minimum point of entry. We'll extend it out to the network interface and bring it into the BTS. So as soon as that handoff's there, we'll have the infrastructure in place, and then they'll extend the circuit out. So very often it's a carrier-led initiative.
Right. Anyone correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe one of the criteria is how many sectors there are in the project, because the more sectors there are, the longer it takes for the circuit to be ordered. It's 6 to 8 months. So you have to define the size of the project, and what types of circuits you have to order from the carriers.
That decision, that really, in most cases, that just should not be happening, really, when you think about it. The length of time that we have to do a design, it should be addressed in the design phase when you know exactly, as Ray says, what's the capacity of the building, what's the function of the building, who's going to be in there, how many people, what carriers, and those discussions should happen up front with the carriers, so you get feedback from the carriers, say, what do you need for this location and this venue? So there are no surprises. They know what they're putting in there for an RF source. They know what their backhaul requirements are, what the capacity requirements are, and they order it. It really should not be a surprise. What is a little bit of an issue is the length of time that it takes to get that circuit.
So the important thing to realize here is that certainly in all cases that we've dealt with, the backhaul is taken care of by the carriers. So the carriers are the ones that order the circuit and define it. And the carriers, unfortunately, certainly for vendor-owned data centers, really don't get involved in these type of discussions until after the design is submitted, approved, the equipment's about to be ordered. So that could be, already within only a few months of that joining. So that's really the issue with backhaul. There's a limit to how early you can get it taken care of.
Yes, sir.
Hi. As the system integrators dealing with the carriers who are now going to, in the future, have to support location for E911, the increased coverage and accuracy there, especially in terms of the high rises and things like that. Are those solutions the SIs are looking into offering, or are you just looking at those to be provided by the carrier?
E911 is really the carrier's responsibility according to the FCC, so it's really not on the integrator at all. It's really 100% on the carrier.
One of the physical components to that, though, which we will expedite, is the GPS, which is located very often on top of the roof. And so we'll, as part of our construction build-out, sometimes it's a little tricky to get there from a pathway perspective, so we'll expedite the planning of that deployment. So that's one of the first components when we greenlight the system, that we have the location-based services. The X and Y plane is one thing, but the Z plane, from what I understand, is still not solved, so you can't pinpoint somebody within that building envelope. That's probably going to change with FirstNet, because they're going to want to know the Z plane. They're going to want to know exactly what floor it is to expedite for recovery.
Thank you.
Great. Thanks for your questions. So in this past hour, we've uncovered multiple strategies to create lots of success for integrators. I'd like to thank Squan for being the panel sponsor. I'd like to also thank the panelists for their time and their valuable insight. And most importantly, I'd like to thank the audience for their participation and supporting NEDAS. So thank you, everybody.
Thank you. Thank you. All right.